From reaching trail to the Great March, from the aging ocean to the endless sea, from Fisherman's Row to Godcroft's. Live from Studio A in PressCorps World Headquarters, this is Foxhole Flash, bringing you the latest news from across the Siva Valley War Zone.
Good morning and welcome to everyone. This is a new edition of the Foxhole Flash, just announced. Is the start of the 66th conflict, coming after the 65th ceasefire in the Siva Valley War. Welcome to the brand new little episode thing we have going on here. This is a new version of Foxhole Flash where we're covering the start of the conflict. I am your host, Everett Way, and I am joined here by one of our Warden correspondents. I'm actually joined here by two Warden correspondents. I will have our Warden correspondent, Alec, here. Here, say hi.
Hey, what's up? How's everyone doing? It's a little early in the morning for me, but I'm sure it's right about the time you want to get into it for everyone else. So, yeah, no, I'm excited. Excited to cover this, and then excited from the upcoming conflict. Yeah, as bad as that sounds.
Certainly not a usual statement, but as journalists, it is our paycheck, so it's kind of what we're here for. I'm also joined here by our newest Warden correspondent, Liam Porter. He's going to be helping us do some live interviews in the field. Liam, how are you doing today?
Once again, the time zones, it is fairly early for me and Alec, but had my coffee, and I'm feeling pretty good. I'm ready to get out and get some reporting done today.
Excellent, great to hear. So, for those here from the announcement when the Foxhole Flash was announced, we do have our call queue open. It is live at the moment. If you do wish to join us here in the chat, we're going to be doing a little bit of talking before the war starts. Some theorizing, some talking about the map, some talking about the previous conflict that just ended. We're going to be doing that just up until the war starts, and then we're going to be covering the opening moves of the war. Again, call queue is open right now. It works just the same as the Zero Dark PressCorps version. You post in there, and we'll take first come, first served. We'll have like 10-15 minutes. We'll talk about whatever's on your mind. We'll talk about stuff with the previous conflict. We can talk about tech. We can talk about the map. But first, I did want to talk with the other Warden correspondents here about the most recent conflict, number 65. Because from my point of view, and I was following the colonial side of that conflict, from my point of view, it was very, very eventful and explosive, especially towards the end. Alec, were you there for the final days of the conflict?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the final days were what defined it, really, wasn't it? Because it was a slog, it was a stalemate for quite a while, and then just sort of everything turned around sort of November 25th, I would say, and there was a couple days where it looked like the colonials were pushing, and it sort of seemed like we were holding them back. Then, yeah, just everything fell down on the Warden side, and they just sort of steamrolled through the baths up. Of course, they had that landing at Maiden's Vale. I think that was a big part of it as well. They never got Kirknell, but, they reconquered all the reaching trail, and they sort of really pushed in there hard, and it seemed like there was nothing the Wardens could do.
It's funny you mentioned that landing in Marben Hollow. I had a little bit of detail come in after the fact about like how they were going to do the landing. My understanding was that they had a naval landing, wow, what alliteration there, planned for a couple different areas, and that was the one that they landed on because Wardens were doing a pretty good job. I believe the term they've co-opted is QRFing. They had a good quick response force responding to all of those. So that was attempt number 3 or 4 to get a landing ship in location.
It was a lot of landing ships deployed by the colonials, not just in the final days, but throughout the entire war. There was quite a big attempt early on, or sort of midway through, for the colonials to land near the Drowned Vale, and that was pushed back. That landing ship was destroyed. Then they tried again in the Drowned Vale before they actually finally were pushed all the way in there. So it was quite a few attempts by the Colonials. I'm surprised that the Wardens didn't really do any themselves, but sometimes that's just the way it works, isn't it?
I think it's a little the East versus West wars. You'd think the landing ships would be a little less common.
Right. Yeah.
Compared to previous East versus West wars, I think from the Warden side we saw about as many landing ships as one would expect, because there's only one water path, and that's straight through Abandoned Ward. Colonials seem to have an uptick in those landing ships, and that's actually really interesting, unique, not something we've seen before. Do you think we'll see more of that coming in now with this diagonal map that we have?
With the diagonal map, maybe. I think that a big part of it is that the Colonials already have the baths, which is probably one of their best shots for landing, right? Like, you'd land in the baths and then sort of go through and take that like they attempted to do before. But the fact that they started with it makes me feel like they would be less inclined to do it again unless they're going back to Maiden's Vale, which would, and I mean, that you would think the Wardens would make some sort of much more of an attempt to defend that, I think, just due to the fact that it was they don't want that to happen again, so there'll be much more defenses there. And I really don't see the Colonials landing anywhere else unless they go all the way around to Godscroft. But then again, that's just going to be a slog to supply. So, to be entirely honest with you, no, not for this map, but in the future, probably. And I kind of hope so as well. It adds another element to it, doesn't it? It's quite interesting.
It really does, and I do. As I've seen like the different wars play out, the naval aspect of Foxhole is, some may say, neglected by the devs. I say if it is, it's also maybe a little bit neglected by the players. Naval warfare in general.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I would like to see more landing ships. Real quick, going back one step, because I realize we mentioned that there is a diagonal map. For the listeners at home, you might want to check the Foxhole official Discord. They have actually released the starting conditions and the first 3 tiers of tech for the map. So if you want to like keep up visually what's going on, that's going to be what we're talking about specifically. So what we're looking at here is actually the last map we had was an East versus West war. This one, we said it's a diagonal war. The Colonials are starting in the southwestern regions. Fisherman's Row, Westgate, and Heartlands are going to be the farthest back in this map. The Wardens are starting in the northeast corner, Viper Pit, Weathered Expanse, and Godscroft. Excuse me.
Don't if you're a Warden listening, don't worry. You can still play around in Godscroft, because I'm unaware of how much fun that region is for everyone. Everyone seems to really like it.
The middle regions are Lynn of Mercy, Deadlands, and Drowned Vale. And like Alex said earlier, of those main towns, the Colonials are starting with the Baths. The Wardens are starting with Ulster Falls in Lynn of Mercy, and Abandoned Ward is starting neutral.
Yeah, and the reason that is quite balanced is because Ulster Falls and the Drowned Vale both have seaports and factories. So it's going to be pretty crucial for the Wardens and the Colonials to get their shipping lanes up and running to those frontline areas, because those are 2 factories that are really close to the front. So if early production there can start, I think it's actually going to be a real help for the remainder of the whole war. It's just about getting everything up and going as quickly as possible. And then obviously securing the Deadlands, securing Abandoned Wards so that shipping lanes aren't going to get harassed.
Yeah, totally agreed. And on the subject of shipping lanes, I was actually looking at that with Ulster Falls and the Baths. So both of those cities have, well, the Baths much more so, they both have bridges going in. One possible play I can see from both sides is not taking the town, but trying to secure or blow the bridges into the town, which would effectively be the same thing. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I actually think that the river is more important than the city, as you said. So just getting the bridges down and setting up a front line on the other side means that freighters can go through. Yeah, no, I actually completely agree. I don't think that the abandoned ward is going to be as big of a sort of central pin to either front as it has been some previous wars. I think most of the conflict actually will be outside of the Deadlands, purely because of the big river that stretches right through the middle of it. I wouldn't be surprised to see either side advance on the north or south side of it and completely encircle it, just because I really don't see a front beginning down there, which for some people might be a great thing, for some people might be a bad thing. But I would be surprised if the Deadlands is where most of the fighting is as well.
Yeah, I think Deadlands is going to be a pretty hot spot. And it's with the diagonal aspect of the map, it kind of goes back to some of the north versus south conflicts. Okay, sorry, let me explain that. With the north versus south conflicts, we do have this one river that kind of cuts the whole map in two. So along the Midlands, we see a lot of bridge battles. Players are notoriously hating on the bridge battles, if I could be a little more direct with that. We're going to see some bridge battles here. Not going to lie, the starting conditions are pretty much right along the river where those bridges are going to be. So right at the start of the war, we're going to see those bridge battles. I guess the key question for both sides is, where do you get across this river? Like, what bridges do you prioritize to try to push past and gain a foothold? And on the colonial side, there unfortunately aren't a lot of options, but I don't think those options are going to include abandoned ward. However, I do think a lot of fighting is going to happen there anyway.
I mean, there always is, as much as some people might hope for a war outside the Deadlands for some, but no, I completely agree. I think there will be a decent amount of fighting in the Deadlands. I think what will be more interesting is to see if it is all bridge battles, because obviously there's that big river that stretches directly through the middle of it. It's I think whoever gets to the other side first, whoever gets their construction vehicle and set up the garrison camp in the abandoned wood first, whoever sets up a front on the other side of the river first will be the people who dictate the conflict. Because really, once the other side, once the colonials are on the other side, theoretically for the wardens, they really, all they have to do is sort of hold them, and then it's up to the colonials to see if they want to sort of flank around or push directly through. It's really just, the biggest thing is just getting across that river, and then you can decide, what your plays are going to be.
Getting across that river is going to be very tough, because before the most recent conflict, structures would be able to, you could destroy structures with small arms fire, and now you can't. I think that's going to have a major effect on bridge battles. Just because you're going to need a transport at the very beginning of the war, you're going to need to get those high explosive grenades dangerously close to the enemies. You're going to have to be more than halfway across the bridge before those can really have any effect. I think those bridges are going to be very bloody, especially if defenses are set up properly on the far side. Sure. Which leaves longer range, either high explosive or artillery fire to clear those bridges out. And actually, that leads me to a point that I wanted to bring up earlier with the 65th conflict. Before the invasion of Drowned Vale and other places from the colonials, you mentioned before, Alec, we had a bit of a stalemate across the board along the mid-regions. And one of the key points of that stalemate, at least from what I saw, was the storm cannons.
Oh, for sure.
Right about day 10, a lot of the storm cannons came online. We saw all of Reaching Trail turn blue in the matter of about 24 hours. People note the invasion of Drowned Vale, but honestly, I do want to point that Reaching Trail went blue very, very quickly, very soon after storm cannons were firing on the front lines. And just after that,
a lot of there was colonial storm cannons that were lost quite quickly in Reaching Trail, weren't there? There was I think the 404th lost like 2 of them in Reaching Trail. relatively quickly after they actually came online. So yeah,
Indeed.
the Wardens just had storm cannon superiority, I guess, in Reaching Trail and in Callahan's Passage. So I think that's why they managed to push through. Because actually in Callahan's Passage, there was the Colonials had these storm cannon up first, but they didn't know that the Wardens were building one at the same time, and it just ended up getting destroyed. So yeah, no, they were quite a big part of it.
I did hear about the Callahan's Passage, and I have a little more personal experience because with that area from last war, I was talking with the people in charge of that storm cannon, and it's actually a very interesting story. Anyone who played the last conflict knows that the area in between Lochinberth and Solus was contested. It was actually a really interesting case study with the first conflict now needing high explosives to kill structures. It was interesting to see players try to work out in real time what the new meta is, if you will, for destroying structures and pushing on structures, building and all that such. When the Colonial Storm Cannon came online, the first thing that they aimed at wasn't another storm cannon, but it was at that front line. And as soon as it opened up, they were actually getting some pretty good progress. And just before, I believe it was the penultimate bunker base, the one that was most heavily defended, they were getting ready to fire on it. And very suddenly, a Warden storm cannon base ranges and fires on and destroys, or at least mostly destroys, the storm cannon that the Colonials were using. I talked to some of the people who own that storm cannon. They said that they scouted and saw the Warden storm cannon, but believed them to be behind by a lot longer, by many more hours than their own storm cannon. It was a bit of a miscalculation on timing. From the player's point of view, they said they weren't sure if it was their scouting and misinterpretation or if it was a possible rendering issue. It was impossible for them to tell even in hindsight.
Yeah, well, that's actually quite funny because I was speaking to the guys on the other side of that, and they were saying that their scouts saw that it was up, and basically they were like, "Oh no, we're dead. Let's get around and see if we can fire off at least one shot." And then they started firing. They're like, "Oh, I actually don't think they know we're here," and they just kept pounding him. And they got it down pretty quick.
And I think it was the right move by the Wardens too.
Oh yeah,
the Colonials made a riskier play, to try to get it to pay off. And for all the information they had, they would think it'd work, but of course that, any inherent part of risk is failure. And I don't know if I'd call it a full failure. Well, I guess, yeah, in hindsight I would. Their storm cannon base did get mopped up by the hits.
Yeah. Well, interestingly, that same storm cannon was actually used throughout the war in Callahan's Passage. The guys inside was an A2DK one, Zakariva. They were pretty much stopping the Colonials every time they tried to advance into places like Locken and Overlook Hill. They actually had, I was speaking to him before, and he said that they had people actually coming at them with 300mm shells and saying, "Oh, can you hit this target, or can you hit this target, here's the shell." So they actually, that storm cannon was pretty popular with the Wardens. It got a lot of use, I think.
Between that and the choke points at the mountains in Callahan's Passage it was very, very hard. I have to agree with you. It was very, very hard for the Colonials to push into Callahan's Passage after that. And I think that lends into part of the decision-making on the Colonial side. They knew that there was storm cannons aimed and ready to fire in the Reaching Trail and Callahan's Passage regions. So they said, okay, well, let's not bash our heads against a wall, so to say, and push into Drowned Vale instead. There was a storm cannon there. I got reports of one, but I didn't see any. Do you happen to know anything about what happened in Drowned Vale?
What happened is I was there, and it just seemed like it was a very quick push, and that the Wardens couldn't really do a whole lot about. The unsee or hear of any storm cannons in the Drowned Vale, though. Yeah, no, I didn't hear about any of that. Just more sort of colonial armor spearheading a push into the pass, and then the Wardens not being able to do a whole lot about it because you know the Wardens didn't get their field artillery online until quite late in the battle, which I think was a big part of it. Because for the Wardens, especially the field artillery, this war was quite a crucial part. You know, I rode along with quite a few of the crews, and they were racking up quite a few kills with that AP, with those AP shells. You know, it only takes one to land on the head of a light tank destroyer, and that's it done, because the crew can't really do anything about it.
Oh, absolutely. FA is still going to be a super weapon at the end of the war.
Yeah, for sure.
Not just for the AP, but also for safely destroying structures at a far distance. And with the new structure meta. Yeah. So I guess that brings us around to the current conflict. Staying on the storm cannon subject, storm cannons are going to be important, and they're going to stay very, very relevant going into future wars. One question that's on both sides is, where are the storm cannon bases going to be? And looking at the colonial side, I can't help but think, and I don't, mind you, right now what we're about to say, listeners, is pure speculation. This is not influenced at all by any regiments or clans speaking to us about this. This is pure speculation on our part. So that said, I think in the Lynn of Mercy, I'm looking at the Prairie Bazaar, Fort Duncan little peninsula there as a potentially strong storm cannon base for either side, if either side can take it.
Yeah, for sure.
What do you think? Where do you think good Warden storm cannon bases would be?
Well, if I may, I may interrupt here.
Sure.
Personally, I've done a lot of reporting on storm cannons. I've done a lot of studying on them, and from what I can tell, as far as this war is concerned with the layout, it seems like most of the favorite spots are still probably going to be used. Namely, probably for the Wardens, there's probably going to be a storm cannon somewhere around the Callahan's Gate area, in those open fields somewhere, because they're good for building. Same goes probably for towards the left of Liberation Point. Maybe that's another location to keep an eye out for one. Perhaps even Drowned Vale, maybe, with this new war layout. You never know. But definitely, I can assure you there will be at least one or two storm cannons in both Callahan's Passage and Marvin Hollow. Not quite sure where they will be with the layout, but with how close they are towards the front line, with the way that the war is laid out, this war, it's almost an impossibility for them to not be placed there. As far as the Colonials go, I would venture to guess somewhere around Hermit's Rest or Foundry area. There are plenty of open fields for them to build in Umber Wildwood, and it's almost, once again, an impossibility for them not to build a storm cannon in Lockmore. So those are the areas that you definitely should keep an eye out for one if you're interested. But there's always the possibility for one to pop up anywhere there's an open field, and you always have to keep that in mind. And one storm cannon has plenty of power in the right situation to make a huge difference in the outcome of the war. So it's definitely something to keep an eye on.
Couldn't agree more. Some areas that I was thinking of as well, and stuff to kind of keep an eye on. Farinac Coast for the Colonials, and for the Wardens, Endless Shore.
Definitely.
So having them
getting Saltbrook up, getting the factories up and running in Saltbrook, I think will be a crucial part of the Warden strategy, just because that's such a crucial town with maybe one or two factories in it, and it'll be quite close to the front line. So if they can get defenses up there and sort of start transporting in, beam mats and different materials, I think there'll be many happy Logi players on the Warden side with such a short road to drive to the front.
I think so as well, and having a bunker base that's protecting those key Logi areas will just make the Logi players feel a lot safer. It'll be a better investment for them, easier staging point to launch into some of the more full regions.
And I imagine there'd be another wooden bunker base around Ulster Falls and the Lynn of Mercy, just because that's another quite crucial Logi town close to the front, and they'll want to protect that. Just not sure quite where they'd place it, just due to the terrain, but I'm sure they'll figure it out.
And that's the point that Liam brings up, is you're definitely going to, on the Warden side, you're definitely going to see some in Callahan's Passage and Marben Hollow, just because you have those wide open areas that you can build in. Callahan's Passage especially, because you have wide open areas that have nice mountains that can sit on either side, so you can reinforce the choke points there very easily. On the Colonial side, you do have the bulwark that goes across, and you could build bunker bases that reinforce that bulwark really, really easily. We'll see that in play probably in Umbra Wildwood and Drowned Vale.
Yeah,
A little
sure.
more than Heartlands. If the Wardens are pushing down into Heartlands and there is necessity to have a storm cannon there because it's a defensive one, I think the Colonials have bigger problems.
Yeah, I think by the time the Wardens get the Heartlands, the Colonials will have different things to worry about.
Exactly. A quick shout out to some of the people telegramming in, if you will. I see Asalia from the Red Cross Legion raising that banner and waving it proudly. Asalia, if you're still listening in, does the Red Cross plan to operate in this conflict? And if so, where? I'm really curious, and all of us here at PressCorps are interested to hear what our brother/sister, non-partisan group, non-combatant group, if you will. We're curious to hear where you guys are operating. And then secondly, calling out to Cluse, a storm cannon on Handsome Hideaway is obviously the meta play to have right there. I say purely sarcastically. Please do not actually take that as advice. Alec, one last thing I wanted to ask you about. With the release of the map, we also have release of the opening tech options for both factions. So I'm curious how you see these tech options. We'll start with the Warden perspective. What do you think of the tech options that you see? And for the listeners at home, could you share what they are?
It's the first two options are field machine gun or the LUV, and I think for the Wardens, they're definitely going to go with the LUV. Yeah, I really don't see them going and picking up a field machine gun for the first step. Next up, we've got the two Warden truck variants and the bus. I think out of the two trucks, I think that the Wardens will probably pick the half-track truck, and the reason for that is that the armored truck, isn't. I mean, obviously it's helpful against partisans, right? But for especially for people like scrappers getting to nodes that aren't really connected to any roads, the half-track truck is quite important. And then next up, I'm not sure if I think that's a spigot mortar and the armored car. If I'm looking at that correctly, yeah. Mm-hmm. So, to be entirely honest with you, I'm not really sure out of the armored car and the spigot mortar, because I think the spigot mortar didn't really get that much use last war, just due to the fact that to really hit anything, it had to get so close. Its max range of 25 meters. It's not really an easy task. An easy task to get anything. But then again, the armored car, it's not really that good, is it? It's good for QRF. So I'm not really sure about that one, but I think if I had to pick a path for the ones, it would be LUV, half-track truck, and then maybe spigot mortar, just because it's new. But yeah, that could go either way.
The spigot mortar is very new, and for those who maybe didn't get to experience it as much last war, it is the Warden response, if you will, to the Colonial Ballista. It also shoots 250mm rounds that are extremely good against structures. It only fires 25 meters. However, the difference is this comes far earlier in the tech tree for the Wardens. The drawback to that is that it is a field weapon as opposed to sitting on a tank chassis. I say tank in the loosest sense here. It's not meant to be the ballista version is not meant to be a combat vehicle. That's been said by the engineers who designed that many, many times. And same with the spigot mortar. It is meant to have infantry up and supporting it, suppressing colonial infantry to try to destroy it. But otherwise just supporting it as it clears out structures.
Yeah, for sure.
I have to say that is going to be a tough call. that third tier for Wardens. I kind of agree. Having an armored car up very early in the war, like you see the Colonial answer for that. There's not really much on the tech tree to respond to either of those options, unfortunately. On the Colonial side, they do have the spear tip and I forget the name of it, but it is the motorbike with the LMG attached to the sidecar. The spear tip is a standard soft top canvas truck with a machine gun on the top of it. It takes storm rifle ammo. On tier 2, we do have the bus. We have the field machine gun, and we have the LMG. I'm sorry. Why is my brain blanking on this? We have the LUV. Excuse me. Same acronym starting with a different letter. We have the LUV, the FMG, and the bus on tier 3. I'm sorry, on tier 2. On tier 3, we do have the MG, LUV, and the APC, which is interesting. Looking at the comparison for tier 3 for both the Wardens and Colonials, normally it's pretty like across the factions. The tiers are pretty comparable. We see that in tier 1 and tier 2. We have different vehicles that can match each other in similar roles, but tier 3 is a bit of a wild card. For the Wardens, you have your choice of either pushing on the front lines harder with AC, or you have structure killing with the spigot mortar. On the Colonial side, you have the Jeep, which is good for anti-structure, a little bit all around, good QRF vehicle, and you also have the APC. It's the first viable amphibious vehicle, and since this diagonal war is going to have a big river that goes across it, that's actually going to be a tough call for the Colonials to make as well. I think it is a bit of a toss-up, just like for the Wardens. I'm not sure where to call that. I'm not quite sure where to call that. If I had to predict for the Colonial side, it's going to be probably the MG bike for their good QRF. The FMG is going to be one of their best options for tier 2, I'd say. With the higher caliber bullets coming out of that, they'll be able to clear the tier 1 structures that will be seen on the front lines, and just any infantry that comes.
Yeah, I honestly wouldn't be surprised if they still pick the lighter LUV though, just based on its pure speed, because that thing is fast, man. Especially when you put petrol in it, it goes like it's very quick.
Yeah, I think they're one. I agree with you, and two, they have 2 LUV options in the very beginning. Yes, the non-MG version will be faster. It depends on how exactly they want a QRF. I think if the Colonials decide they do want to go the APC, then they'll take the LUV in tier 2, and vice versa. If they do want to have the machine gun version of the LUV, they'll take the FMG for better frontline pushing in tier 2. So with that said, we are about 5 minutes before the start of the war, assuming it hasn't been delayed.
3 minutes.
3 minutes. 3 minutes, excuse me. Ooh. We're going to take a quick music break here as we switch a little bit of the back end here in the studio. We're going to go to a quick commercial break, if you will. When we come back, it will be the start of the conflict. Listeners, stay around. We're still going to be here covering live from the front lines. And yeah, this is your chance to log in and get in the game instead of listening to us. Hello and welcome back to Foxhole Flash with PressCorps. So, sorry, Chet Baker, I have to cut you off a little bit. So we're back here in the home regions now. If you are not playing, or if you are playing and haven't paid attention, there is a delay to the start of the war by 5 to 10 minutes. And that's the perfect amount of time, actually, to inform our audience of some extra things PressCorps has going on right now. If you are a part of the PressCorps Discord, you'll see in our welcome and mission channel up there. If you're not, by the way, you should absolutely join the Discord. You'll find the link in the Foxhole official Discord. Otherwise, you can ask us and we'll ping this. You can click on the picture in the stream, and that'll take you directly to our Discord. And when you're in there, look at the welcome and mission channel. There's a whole bunch of information that you'll see in there, and one of the things in there is you can subscribe to our newsletter, if you will. We have releases at the end of every war. They're little packages of all different news wires. It's a newswire release collection for War 65, was released earlier today. So if you're a subscriber, check that out. If you're not a subscriber yet, join the Discord. You can subscribe with the React role up there in our channel, and you'll see where our newswire release collection is. It's really good. It's all sorts of stories from throughout the war. If you were here and wanted to see stories from a different perspective, or maybe you only joined in the latter half of the war and wanted to hear the events that played out leading up to your personal experiences, they're all there. War 65 Newswire Release Collection. It's in our releases segment of our Discord. Please go check it out. It's really good. Lots of people worked very hard on that. So with that kind of said, Liam actually, I'm going to give the floor to Liam real quick because, like you said earlier, he's done a lot of research on the different storm cannon placements, not just that, but also the locations for potential conflict to happen in this conflict. With the new map, Liam, you said you had an idea of where the hotspots are going to be at the start of the war, yes?
Well, of course, we'll always see hotspots. There are three currently contested areas that both factions have laid claim on, but they haven't making the moves to secure them, that being the Lynn of Mercy, Abandoned Ward, and the Baths. All three of these are major towns that are very important to the war effort, and securing any one of these would make a very significant difference.
It's they've actually changed it from the original first map, which saw the Colonials holding the Baths and the Wardens holding Ulster. They've actually just changed that, so now all three, Ulster, Abandoned Ward, and the Baths, are now neutral at the start. So I don't know how that's going to change it up, but it's I think it's a quite a big change they've just made in the final couple minutes.
It's going to be a race to get to those, because having access to factories close to the front line it makes a huge difference, as well as the construction yards for making emplacements once those finally start rolling out. Furthermore, with the direction that the war is taking, as far as instead of being east-west or north-south, it's a diagonal. Here we're going to see probably going to see some interesting plays and some border crossings that we wouldn't normally see. For instance, if the Wardens do manage to push south on the left side of Drowned Vale, not only would they control a very significant portion of Drowned Vale, they'd also be able to push north up behind Bryan Glen and cut it off. And there are other interesting spots like Spearhead in Faranac Coast, which usually is a Warden stronghold, but with the current layout of the war, it looks like it's going to be a very, very significant colonial stronghold if they can supply it with water logistics, because it's got one way in and one way out. And if they do manage to hold, which is a very, very easy bridge to hold, mind you, if they do manage to hold that, Spearhead will be very, very difficult for Wardens to take down if they do ever get to that point. So there are several interesting spots that you, as the soldiers, might encounter this war, and I'm hopeful that you will all have a very, very enjoyable time, and that you won't be sent home without a leg. It's just make sure you've got a medic on standby, and also very excited, I know I am, to see places that I've never seen before with this new war layout. I know every soldier, they have the great dream of wandering around and seeing the sights. And I think that might come true this war, so it's very exciting.
I think so as well, yeah. There's going to be, with the diagonal map, they're always a little bit, interesting. It kind of has a feel of north-south, kind of has a feel of east-west. I mean, I guess that is kind of the point of diagonals. But even on, this map, just that small 45-degree change makes more of a difference than one would think. And speaking of more of a difference than one may think, the most recent change to this war as of 7 minutes ago, just to make it clear for the audience, there is an active change happening. We did mention this already, Liam and Alec both mentioned this, but I want to kind of emphasize the point. All three major starting cities along the mid-region, that's Ulster Falls, Abandoned Ward, and the Baths, are starting neutral. They're not going to be owned by either side. The territory around them will be the same, as you've seen. However, the towns themselves are going to be neutral. Those are obviously going to be hotspots, like Liam said. Liam, we brought this question up earlier, and you kind of started on it and went in a different direction. There is a big river that cuts the mid-regions in half, so the big question is, where do you cross that river? I want to throw that question to you. Since you're looking at it from the Warden perspective, where would you cross the river to try to get a foothold into colonial territory?
So there are quite a few options as far as our tacticians are concerned. There's always Drowned Vale. It's a very difficult push through Drowned Vale, but considering that most of the bridges in Drowned Vale are bridging shallow water, it's significantly easier to push across them. There's always the Slog in Deadlands, and if you do manage to take Abandoned Ward or get over any one of those bridges, if you capitalize on it, you can actually get across the river there, but it takes a very significant amount of resources. And I think for the Wardens specifically, and maybe even for the Colonials, Lynn of Mercy is going to be an excellent location to try and make a difference early war, because as it stands right now, in Lynn of Mercy, the Wardens control two bridges towards the north that actually bridge the river and allow them to get towards the other side, at least all the way down into Farinac. Of course, they will have to cross more bridges, but it will allow them to take a very significant amount of territory and hold it fairly easily. It doesn't seem like the Colonials have much of a similar option on the other side, unless they do manage to get across the Baths towards Bootnap and Drowned Vale. And in Lynn of Mercy as well, for the Colonials, I did bring this up. Next to Fort Duncan, sorry, I was spacing out for a moment. Next to Fort Duncan, there is another bridge that the Colonials currently have loose control of. And if they do capitalize on that bridge, they can push up towards Outwich Ranch. And I've seen this happen quite a few times. It is a difficult push, of course, but if they do succeed in that push, they can cut off the northern side for the most part of Lynn of Mercy and take control of it, which if they do manage, if any faction manages to take control of a center region early, that can spell disaster for the opposing team if it's not handled correctly. So these are always things that you should watch out for when you're playing on the front line.
Yeah, I agree. Taking any of the middle regions early is going to be a high priority for both factions. I think Lynn of Mercy is going to be, since we're talking about that, I think that's going to be a little more important than this war than Lynn of Mercy typically is. Even though it's not a full Logi town, the whole thing, it has a lot of very important tactical and strategical how am I trying to end that sentence? It's very important tactically and strategically, is what I'm saying. The bridge that crosses the river at Fort Duncan is going to be a very important spot for Colonials to hold on to. They have that small little peninsula. If Wardens can break through there, that opens up a huge gap to cut into Deadlands. We saw that a couple wars ago, where that, as soon as they got into... Aha! Actually, I'm going to interrupt myself here. If you are in the game, it seems that the war... Oh, I'm sorry, they are just resetting the map. I apologize. They are simply resetting the map. There was
no, I'm deploying now.
Oh, is it? Oh,
yeah,
okay.
No, we're up and running.
That's really interesting, because the map, as it still looks like, and this is a bit of a technical question, it looks like Lynn of Mercy and Drowned Vale are still offline from the deployment screen.
That's really interesting, because I am viewing the world map from an undisclosed location with some of the high command members, and they have full access to both Lynn of Mercy and Drowned Vale here.
Aha, and I see that. It looks like to be simply a visual bug. It looks like Lynn of Mercy and Drowned Vale are offline, however, one can still deploy there. And, well, that starts it. That is the start of the 66th conflict. Colonials and Wardens, both of you, good luck to each other. We're going to follow where the action goes. And again, we think the major action is going to happen around those major cities.